and how is that changing? I think we heard some of that in the previous discussion. How do people begin to use their rights? And I think we heard some interesting examples how, in light of Putinism, people are kind of returning to traditional methods of asserting their rights, but we also got a glimpse of kind of alternative approaches. So for example, through non-governmental organizations. And we're going to continue to explore this theme in this panel on the social demand for rights and how Russian citizens exercise these rights under various conditions. And in order to do so, we have three very leading experts and activists in the area of human rights. We have Karina Moskalenko, who is a leading human rights attorney in Russia and also the founder of the International Protection Center. She will be followed by Ivan Pavlov, who is the founder and chairman of the Institute for Information Freedom Development, Russia's largest non-governmental organization dealing with the freedom of information. And finally, we'll have Ivan Nenenko, who is the deputy director of Transparency International Russia. So we'll begin with Karina. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for inviting. Thank you that you still remain here, and even we are very few now. I'm happy to speak among the narrow circle of the colleagues, because if you tolerate it until this time, I'm sure you care about the issue, and then I am in the right place. Some of my colleagues asked to, they apologize, they speak Russian. I would apologize, I would speak English. I hope you would not very much suffer with my English, but I found it more personal contact with the audience. Some of my Russian colleagues apologize that they have to read in order to be short. That would be for me also very convenient, but I would apologize that I would not read, because being a member of the last panel, it's almost impossible to prepare the notes which you can simply read. You only can think while you are speaking and find proper expressions to summarize somehow what people already have said on the matter, and to share with you some of my thoughts, fears, and hopes. So, I don't know if Arseny Roginsky was so tolerant to remain here until he's coming. Okay. Well, he's smoking. This is my jealous, because I would like to smoke with him, but it's impossible.
We will carry on anyway. Yes.
Yeah. I would say that today I'm speaking on behalf of the organization of which does not provide any political efforts. We are pure legal organization, not even paralegal, although I recognize, I appreciate what paralegals are doing in my country. But this is just by chance. We all are professional lawyers, exercising the rights of and defending the rights of our clients at the courts. We would like to defend them in domestic courts, but unfortunately we mostly defend them at the European Court of Human Rights, because at the domestic level we almost always supposed to lose our cases. But at the European Court, the picture is completely different, and we can help people even without political means to work. So we are pure legal group, which is using mostly legal grounds for our work. I'm trying to forget, but I cannot. We started to discuss the Jackson-Vanik Amendment, and of course, using my the previous panel habit to forget about everything, why we came here, I would like to forget about, but cannot. And I said that yesterday in our luncheon that I'm here because I'm looking for some effective mechanisms to push my authorities follow the rules and follow the laws. Previously, somehow 30 years ago, 25 years ago, this amendment was very effective. And it brought such a remarkable effect and result that just forget about this amendment. We shouldn't. I'm not here and everywhere politician. I'm not business or economist. Here in this country, I'm so privileged that I'm not even a lawyer, because I'm practicing all Russian law and all European law. But what I know for sure, people here at the Congress who sometimes produce very important ideas and they work, they probably would use this model or another model or find something the same quality of the effectiveness, some kind of measures to push the governments, not only the Russian government, but those governments who not fulfill their international obligations and national obligations, push them to do correct things. I agree with Sarah that first of all they must, the authorities of your country have to be closer to the etalon, because we always use the American system as the etalon, and when we have violations and clear violations of human rights here, we are very sad, because our authorities immediately refer to this country authorities saying if they can't do that, why we shouldn't do that. And it is also the question of the moral opportunity to do notice to other nations if you do not follow the rule. And the fact that Mr. Obama, he recognized the violations, in my view, it's cleaning the United States. It's kind of if our authorities so quick to recognize the violations, not 70 years ago, but at least 40 years ago, I would be happy, but they are not supposed to do that. And that's why I'm looking that if this another, of course, now it could be only another amendment or mechanism which would influence the authorities of those countries which should not follow the commitments, to push them to do right things. I would be happy, but for this we have to explain to the to other people, to other nations, to other authorities that something is going wrong. We had today different views. Somebody thinks that my friend Sam, for example, he feels that everything is going, if not absolutely perfect, but at least satisfactory in my country. Of course, we have now free market features, but is it free market if, after the Khodorkovsky case, if it is free market if the whole business community suddenly received this signal that they can behave freely, but their freedom restricted of their government's will, and not only view but will? Or otherwise, it would happen with anybody. And why they choose this company? Because they are the best, I would say. They paid the biggest amount of the taxes. bigger than anybody else. They were the most transparent. At that time, they already had the international auditorium, right? Audience, showing that something in past was not very acceptable by the Western world, but now they are doing better and better. And as soon as they felt that they are transparent, clean, and well doing, they started to express their own views on who should be financed before the election, should we finance the civil society, whom we should assist, the groups of philatelists, of the groups of human rights activists, and they expressed their preferences. And after that, we found not Mikhail Khodorkovsky, but those who are not flee to the West, all others in prison. And they are now political prisoners, together with other my clients. So, of course, it is free market, but what the ugly form of free market? And is it free market, actually? And, of course, we have also freedom of movement. The same Khodorkovsky had full rights to move from the Russian Federation and even remain in the United States. But he had also the right to move back to the Russian Federation, saying that I would prefer to be a political prisoner than a political immigrant. And he was arrested. The same Anna Politkovskaya. She could leave the country, but she preferred to stay there and do not close the eyes to what happened in Chechnya. She couldn't tolerate, just because she was very, very, very honest. And we cannot replace this lady with somebody else, although our president said that she is so unremarkable person that even her death created more difficulties than her work, and who cared about her publications. By the way, he explained to somebody that that's a pity that you killed her in my birthday. This is bad present to my birthday. She is nobody. We could easily manage without even killing her. You can manage your ideas without killing her, but her death created more problems than her work. I don't know if these people have the ears to hear what they are saying, but that was sad. So it is, of course, freedom of movement. Nobody would push you to remain in your country. And sometimes even somebody would be happy to not see you in your country. But if you remain in the country, you would be arrested or killed or something else. And the responsibility of this lies completely and solely with the authorities. Why? Nobody has proven that somebody gave the order to kill or to arrest, although we know there was an initiative from the highest authorities to arrest the almost all people in UCAS who do the company's policy. Although we know that some of the orders on some of the information before Anna Politkovskaya's killing was concentrated in Lubyanka, and this is from the case materials in both cases. It's of course freedom of movement and free market, but in as we say, по-русски, freedom of movement по-русски, and free market по-русски. And of course, this amendment would never work again if the things would remain like this, and nobody is obliged, especially in the United States, care about the sense of the things. But I just want you to know that. And coming back to our main notion to use only the legal mechanisms and human rights protection. Now Arseny Roginsky came back, and I can repeat that. We are, with mathematical methods, trying to prove that all these freedoms and all these rights, in essence, do not generally exist. And what we are doing, we are assisting the United Nations meetings and committees with our reports. And if you would be of the opinion of my learned friend Sam, that everything is going more or less satisfactory, you would completely contradict to the findings of the Human Rights Committee based on the big report of the Russian Federation and our very modest shadow report. You would completely contradict all the findings of the special rapporteurs of the Council of Europe, appointed to go to Russia to learn the situation. And they did it, and you cannot deny that they were honest to do that. And you would completely contradict those 800 judgments of the European Court of Human Rights on Russian cases, which are not just a view or somebody's opinion. These are binding judgments which the Russian authorities have to recognize and follow and fully implement, and not only pay the compensations, but also take measures of the general character. That is what we are doing. We do not go to the demonstrations. It doesn't mean that we do not sympathize those people who go to the demonstration. We do not use political measures. It doesn't mean that we do not have all of our lawyers their own political views and opinions. But when I ask my lawyers to come to the demonstration to be nearby, somebody has to be out of the demonstration to defend people. So we are very practical and, I'm afraid, very pragmatic. But what we need to not pronounce political slogans or support or defend political ideas, but if we are professionals, we have to stay apart. When Stas Dmitrievsky has published his fantastic book, 2 volumes, which Sarah was already mentioned, this is description of all the crimes against the Chechen population. The second volume. The first is more, this is a big research and very serious research. But the second volume, you would read word by word and you would have all the picture. And this is not his subjective view. He used only well-established and well-checked facts. This is, and for saving him, he wants me to be a kind of participate and product. No. He used our cases. He used a memorial cases and many other cases. But what we did, our center, I published the recensia, as we say, criticism on this book, and we explained that this is a research, this is a scientific work, huge work. So what we are doing, we keep us separate of the politics, because we have, I think and I hope, stronger weapon, and we want to use it in order to support our people in their very, very difficult task to defend their rights. I'm sorry I was so long and I haven't covered some of the, but I hope if there are questions.
We can come back at questions.
Okay.
Ivan.
Thank you, Will. Organizers pushed me to speak English, and according with the tradition which was created by Lyudmila Alexeyeva, I have to apologize for the level of my English. It's it's growing very slow, but not so, but much faster than social demand for human rights is growing in Russia. So I'm going to speak about new Freedom of Information Act, which just appeared in Russia. It was effective since January 2010, just 1 month in acts. By the way, strange and very interesting coincidence that Russian parliament passed this act the same day which President Obama signed his first presidential decree memorandum on transparency and open government in the United States. And it's very interesting coincidence. Just want to say a couple of words about short descript this law. First of all, information covered by Russian FOIA is very broad category of information. So actually it's all information which holds governmental agencies and subordinary organizations. I think it's a biggest thing which biggest positive things which has which this law has. Second is a presumption of openness. All information is open except some secrets which must be defined as special federal law. Not another normative legal acts, but only federal law can restrict access to information. It's also very important and progressive thing. Huge massive of information which listed in this law must be available online. It's also very good and modern contemporary stuff which state in this federal law. And I think that Russian way to the freedom of information go through the e-government. It's absolutely opposite that this way developed in the United States or in Europe. Yeah, countries in Europe, in the United States, goes through the freedom of information towards the e-government. We goes back way. So our freedom of information developed from the e-government development. So another issue, it's a limited time to respond on a request, freedom of information requests. I know that in the United States it's a huge problem. Yeah, it's constantly delays and delays. In Russia, it's limited by 30 and can be in some cases expand to the 45 days. So 45 days you can have you have right to get response from the government. So and of course for another positive stuff, I can say that access to information is almost free for Russians. There is a government must define a special maximum volume of information which can provide it for free. If its requested volume exceeds this volume, then requester has to cover expenses only for copying and posting. So of course there is some shortcoming in our FOIA. Is absence of responsibility officials for the violation of this law. Unfortunately, amendments to the Code of Administrative Code didn't come through our parliament, and these amendments included norms which change the responsibility of officials which violated the freedom of information. But in spite of this shortcoming, I think that it's some fact of the adoption of this law itself is a huge step in a history of Russian young democracy development and step in the right direction. So I think that this law is maybe first for last 15 years, which created for Russians really new right, because you know that Russia didn't recognize freedom of information, right to access to governmental information before, and now Russian has this. So, you know, in condition of our deep tradition of secrecy and legacy of the closed society, we have some chance to change this. And of course, FOIA is completely new conception for Russian government, and I would call it event like a legal democratic revolution, because it's create a special atmosphere for an infrastructure for NGOs, for human rights NGOs to work and to make people free, because information makes people free, yeah, and make government more responsible. So I think that I have to say what's main point of what main aim on of this law. First of all, of course, I have to say that freedom of information gives people possibility to implement another rights, because it's a key right of the all democracy and all human rights. Yeah, if you have possibility to access to governmental information, including legal information, you has more possibility to implement your other human rights. So second is corruption. You know, it's a huge social disease in Russia. It's absolutely exceed all reasonable limits, and government started to understand it, and maybe it was one factor that it was this law was eventually passed. I think that Russian government, before they think that, okay, how we will fight with corruption? Governmental control, increased punishment, not 8 years imprisonment, 10 years for bribes. What else? Increase quantity of the prosecutors. Not 100 prosecutors, will be 200 prosecutors. But they don't understand that public control is here. Yeah, it's much more effective. Yeah, when you know millions eyes of the co-citizens will follow, will watch how is government is acting, what they are doing for the taxpayers' money, and what each officials make a decision and can have possibility to read these decisions. Of course, officials would be more careful with what they are doing and how they decide some questions. And of course, I have to say that economical financial crisis helped in this matter a lot. I now will try to explain why. You know that Russian market, stock market, fall down. It's almost crashed in 2008. And you know, when we started to discuss promotion of the draft of the Freedom of Information Act with the Ministry of Economical Development, I used one argument. I told them, you know, why it's crashed so deep. So even there is an anecdote about it. Then what Russia does after get a bottom of the crisis, it started to dig. You know, and why it so happened? And we started to, you know, make options, you know, because a lot of speculators on the market. Yeah, why a lot of speculators on the market? Because speculators like huge profit. Where it's possible, where market is black. I mean black, not transparent. Where no access to the information. Where no access to the governmental information. Where no access to regulations. Yeah, only such conditions can provide the situation when market is down, all speculators took their money and go away. So, and I know that this argument was one of the main argument why Medvedev decided to go this draft of the federal law, как это say, чтобы он прошел через Думу, to pass the parliament. So, of course, now we have a very important resource for development democracy in Russia and promote another human rights. But now it's very important also that somebody would implement this law. And this is about social demand, yeah? Unfortunately, you know, I don't feel it. I don't feel any social demand in this sphere because, you know, only one local organization, I don't say now about international, Transparency International, because it's a huge international organization, yeah? But only one local organization on a whole big, huge Russia works in the sphere of the access to information. I know at least, you know, 20 organizations working in Europe, in European countries, and same quantity in the United States. But Russia has only one. It's absolutely not enough. And of course, no people, not so many people knows about law, yeah, and not so many officials read this law. Fortunately, because if they would read it, maybe this law would never would passed, yeah. So, and I would say that about social demand, because our panel has a title, Social Demand for Human Rights in Russia. I think it's a really big problem in Russia. And there is a reason, on my point of view, you know, between human rights movement and the government, there is a very aggressive war. It's a war. Let's call things their names. It's a very aggressive conflict. And in such conditions, human rights movement has to aim on the government. Government is our target audience. And people not in this target. And they just look as we fighting with the government. And they think that it's not something it's not there, yeah? And very important for human rights movement, I think, to try little bit move their faces towards the people and started to educate them, right? Started to explain them values which we're trying to defend. So I think that it's a way to increase social demand for human rights in Russia. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, hello. I'm probably the youngest speaker here. And so I'll be probably more also talking from the youth perspective. Well, the topic for our panel was emerging social demand for human rights. And if you would directly ask this question, like, do you need human rights in Russia? You would probably, like from most of the people, you get the answer no. Because, well, people don't trust in human rights, most of them wouldn't even understand what you're asking them, and they would be more thinking about this myth of Western American idea of whatever. But if you really look deep into those rights and see how, if we're talking about young generations, they would react, then we can say that there is something has changed. And, well, there is this funny example which I like. In the year 2008, in September, there was, well, a process to close a TV channel was showing actually cartoons, but like South Park cartoon. And generally for South Park cartoon, it was in a procedure of closing because, well, some church groups decided that it violates their rights, this cartoon. But it's nevertheless the main thing which was happening is this popular TV channel which was popular among young people with all this kind of Griffins, South Park, and all these kind of cartoons was going to be closed. And those young people who never go on those demonstrations for other reasons went on streets. And they were like the most creative demonstrations you ever see in Moscow, with like Putin kills Kenny and all this kind of stuff. So, talking from human rights perspective, we can say that they were protecting freedom of speech. But they wouldn't say it this way. They would say that they're protecting their Kenny and Cartman and all those people whom they love. So, from one hand, yes, they wouldn't stand up for human rights as you call them human rights. From the other hand, they are ready to stand up for the right for freedom of speech, for them to get this information. If you would tomorrow get, like, for example, if tomorrow's government decides, like, for some stupid reason to forbid to forbid the internet access or make the censorship as in China, well, you'll have lots of young people on the streets because for them this is a basic value. Well, they get everything on the internet. For them, TV is not even maybe that big of the reason. That's why they don't maybe have such a big problem with all those stupid news on the TV because, well, lots of people in my generation that don't even watch TV. I don't have a TV for the last 5 years, I think, and that's the same with lots of young people in Russia. They just don't even have TV in there when they start to rent an apartment. They watch video on the YouTube and that's it. Well, that's not only about young people. You can see that some other basic values became like really core values for people. Well, 30 years ago we didn't have any kind of private property. Now in Moscow, I will give some examples from Moscow, but that's also a case from other regions would be as well. We had this case of Butovo region where government was going to tear down the buildings and people were standing till the last on the barricades to stop it. Now we have a case of Rechnik, which is quite controversial because it violates ecological laws and it is built near the river. But nevertheless, people believe in their right for property, and they are protecting their houses. And some of them are ready to protect it with their guns and say that they're going to sacrifice their life for their houses. So this property is core value for them. And 30 years ago, you would say that, okay, I mean, I remember it only as a child, but we were told, okay, we're moving from this flat to this, to this общежитие, how would you say it? Dormitory, or like communal flat. And you just move there. It's not like you wouldn't ever consider it to be any kind of like you can have a word in this. You live there where it is told you by the government. Nowadays it's quite different, and those people they were demanding, and today it's actually president even answered to their demands, and he ordered prosecutor office to figure out is this tearing down of their village is according to law or not. So this is also quite a thing which changed actually. The current president, Medvedev, he started to react to some calls from the civil society, which is really different from what it used to be from the Putin. well, I wouldn't say that they're like really different. They're kind of from the same group, but this small part is really big difference, which, well, I see and our organization is also feeling. Well, Putin was strongly against the idea to respond to any kind of proposition from its civil groups. He saw that this is showing his sickness, not sickness, but weakness, sorry for my English, but thickness as well. So if they ask him for something, he must not react, because then he's putting himself on the same level as those stupid people going on the streets and showing that they can go on the streets. And he was trying to avoid this as much as he could. And Medvedev is kind of different. He in this perspective only, I would say. But he's ready to react, and if there is any kind of social demand which he can notice, if for example if it's on the web, or if it is any kind of big demos on the street, he will react somehow. He will say that this is nothing to react to. He will, well, there was lots of examples like this. There was, for example, starting from some small issues, like a house where older people lived in one region. The news got on the web how people are badly treated there, and several weeks later, well, it changed. It was a persecution order to check it, and president said that, okay, I was going to do it, but like I was reading in the news on the web, I was going to do it, but the government done it even faster than me, and that's good. They're now reading the web as well. But he openly said that he was reading it on the web, and it wasn't on any kind of other news. And there is some other issues. He's trying to react to those civil changes, to civil society requests. So that's a good part. And that's now it's a hard situation for NGOs in Russia, because we're not ready for this situation. Like we are generally still in the same time as like Putin rule. We didn't change our rhetorics, and that's the problem with Transparency International as well. We are still uncomfortable in this situation. Well, as Alexander Vychovsky says, that they accepted the money from the government. Last year we decided, Transparency International Russia decided not to accept those money, and we're still trying to find our position with this new situation when, for example, head of Transparency International Russia is a member of the President Council on Human Rights. But on the same time, we still try to criticize them. But on the other hand, well, this position with some people, they think that you're now together with them, so you're not fighting corruption, obviously, because they're so corrupt. So this is kind of really hard situation which we are now. And what Ivan Pavlov was already addressing, the problem is that NGO now are still more talking with the government and less talking with the people. And what was already said, that Freedom of Information Act is a great step forward, but people don't know about it. I could say the same also about other transparency issues, like Declaration of Property, which came into act from the 1st of January, finally. And people don't know it. They would say that nothing has been done in fighting the corruption. But this is a big step forward. At least all government officials now declare their property. And actually you can get some of this information and check what they have, what they really have, and what they declare. And that's a big still step forward. Maybe it will not work this year, but actually in the long term, that's a basic brick on which you build anti-corruption legislation and anti-corruption mechanism. And that's a big, actually, problem for NGOs, that we need to do this hard work, go to people and explain them about Freedom of Information Act, that they now have their right, and they should use it, about this declaration thing, and they should check on their officials what the properties they declare, and all other issues. And that's kind of surprising situation for us, because we wouldn't believe 5 years ago that we would have this like declaration of property or some other pieces of legislation which are there, and we were fighting for them. Or, for example, that Russia would actually accept 14th Amendment for European courts, which was also like surprising like several years ago during Putin's rule, and now we were demanding it. Now it passed, so we also have to change our maybe our perspective of what we are doing. And I'll also repeat, Transparency International is right now hardly trying to find our new position in all this current situation. Well, and talking also about emerging social demands, there was already this mentioning this topic of police reform, and that was also quite a clear social demand for it, with different kind of groups demanding for it in different ways, and experts demanding, young activists blocking the main roads of Moscow several years ago to demand change in police, and that police is beating young people, and that's not how it should be done. And on one hand, they maybe will not be ready to support like for demonstration for human rights, but they are ready to risk their kind of like their security and blocks this main street to protest about this generally violation of human rights when police is beating people. So this depends also on how you call it, and if you will be sticking to the name of human rights, maybe yes, maybe you're dropping some values on it. Some can say it. But on the other hand, then some core values of human rights are already core values for many people, and that's maybe not an emerging demand, but they're ready to protect them when the government steps into it. So that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ivan. I just want to first touch upon a common theme that you've all talked about in one way or another, and that is to what extent one can today work within the Russian legal system. You talked about defending property rights, FOIA requests, and even the European Court kind of works within the Russian legal system. So I'm just curious if each of you could just comment briefly on to what extent you feel you can work within the present Russian legal system, and to what extent you feel, as was discussed earlier, that you need to kind of potentially take a more dissident approach to working with, to approaching these types of human rights.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of approaches in this direction. You know, it's up to us. Yeah, each of human rights defenders, human rights activists acting according with their experience, with their knowledge, and they try to use it as effective as possible. So I am a lawyer. I like to defend something in a court. Yeah, it's more привычней, how to say.
I'm used to it.
Used to.
More привычней, familiar for me to say something in a courtroom than to go to the demonstration, for example. Yeah, and most important, it's more effective for somebody who we're going to defend. And I think that maybe I can assume that maybe government will create such condition when I will go to the demonstration also. Yeah, it's also possible. But I hope that everybody of us will do our best, what people expect from us to do. That's my answer.
There are some things which give us some optimism. The Russian judicial system is lack of everything: lack of independence of judiciary, lack of legal representation, lack of fairness, everything. And that's why so many cases are located now with the European Court of Human Rights. But it's still the judicial system. It's still not the what we had during the Stalin's regime. That would be probably convenient for the authorities, but they cannot change the constitution and the Russian judicial system work. The problem with it is that with this lack of independency, all the principal issues cannot be properly defined before the court. But having court's judgments, we can appeal them, we can go again to the European Court of Human Rights and demonstrate if there's these arguments of the court and not logical or contradict to the law. This is a kind of opportunity. We still have constitution, and we have still constitutional court. And although majority of really well-thinking people left the court, and the last signal was Mr. Kononov, who couldn't anymore tolerate what happens at the European Court. Still, some of the submissions to the European Court, to the Constitutional Court, make it impossible to answer in the wrong way. Still, it is a court. And sometimes we have really interesting decisions of the Constitutional Court which help people, and we still use this remedy as maybe a less effective remedy than in 90s, but still really helpful remedy. And we have the access to the international courts, like European Court of Human Rights, and the decisions are binding. And thank you, you remind about the Protocol 14. Of course, that was the biggest harm which we had, that 2 years the Russian authorities blocked this protocol, because so many cases could be decided already now, and but still, one day the Russian authorities couldn't be the only of the 47 countries refraining of doing that, because that was a point at which they had to decide, should they stay at the Council of Europe or should they demonstrate their withdrawing of all the international commitments. And this court gives the Russian people so many hopes. If you push me to work in our judicial system without the potential possibility to go to the standards established by the European Court, I would just maybe give up. Maybe not, maybe I cannot leave my clients, but I would give up in sense. I would say my people become
We don't believe.
really hopeless. But with these standards, we still can work and assist people. There are some other positive things.
Well, I'm probably giving one non-lawyer point of view. So I would say that, well, we have some kind of law system, but the being active on the streets or on like any kind of other social activities really important to our daily life. And there is just different approach how you're dealing with the case. And since it was said that our court system is really dependent, not independent, so those actions on the street sometimes help those court decision as well, because they can decide that they don't need any more of this, well, appraisal and like ask court to decide the way they would be better. So this actually goes hand in hand together.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah.
Hi, thank you. People who know me know that I'm a meeting snob, and I have to say this has been just a great day. So thank you so much to Kenan and the Jackson Foundation. I have a question about FOIA, and then a comment taking us a little bit back to the Surkov-McFall Commission that we were talking about, but it has to do with Transparency International. On the FOIA question, as an American, I have sent a lot of FOIA requests to my government, and it takes typically 2 years to get a response. Can you tell me, Ivan, can you FOIA a request for something that happened in the 1930s? Does it pertain to actions of the Soviet government, or is it only for the Russian government? And the reason I ask is, would there be a way, for example, for, let's say, my grandfather, great-grandfather had been disappeared in the terror. Could I FOIA the government to get any information about what happened to him? Okay, so that's because that would be an interesting possibility of generating potentially some social demand. And for the other, Ivan, there are at least one other person in the room who was in the McFall-Surkov meeting, the afternoon part. The afternoon part was when the civil society, Kavlichka, was there. I mean, some of us were from civil society, but a lot of us weren't. And as somebody who'd worked very hard on the Civil Society Summit in July, I was disappointed in that we still don't have a civil society to civil society forum set up. We've requested many times to the State Department. I think we need to collectively express our social demand for this from all sorts of donors. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. But I think if the McFall-Surkov thing is only that's the only civil society thing going on, it will be seen as a failure. I think, to be fair to at least the Obama administration, they have very low expectations for this. I mean, people I know have been very exercised about it, but you know, they don't think that this is a miracle or a silver bullet. There were a couple interesting moments, though, I would say, in the meeting, and one of them was with Transparency International, where there was an exchange between TI USA and Surkov talking about, look, you know, we don't have these aren't sort of made-up criteria. We have very specific ways in which we judge these things, and we're willing to be completely transparent with you and sit down and show you how we come to a deliberation on corruption. And Surkov seems sort of interested in that. And you know, if you can chip away at that kind of suspicion and stereotypes, that seemed like an interesting possibility. And I agree with you. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about, is there a difference between Putin and Medvedev or not? You know, I don't think we could have organized what we did in July 2 years ago, even. That there is a difference between, and there's certainly people who I think are freer in Russia or live freer in Russia, and people who are still looking over their shoulder and want to please the Kremlin. But if we can rush into that whatever space exists and try and have that civil society to civil society conversation, it would be helpful, and I think, you know, what you've done today is you've facilitated it, so thank you very much.
So my part of your question is just easy. Yeah, you can ask any information, anytime. It doesn't matter when it was, you know, when its document was produced. Yeah, in any form. Yeah. Law doesn't have a restriction in this matter. Of course, we will look how, you know, government will implement this law. It's a good law, yeah, but we know that, you know, in Russia there is a law and there is a practice of implementation, and between these two substantions there is a huge gap, yeah, but we will try to cut this gap, yeah, to make it closer to each other. And for terminology of this law, формулировки, concept of this law, very clear. You know, we work very hard to make it so clear and without any double understanding, yeah, that government would just implement it so literally, like it written. So, write your first FOIA request. You has a right.
We'll see if it gets answered in 45 days. Ivan.
And about this Surkov-Makfal commission, I wasn't there, but what I can say is that our main outcomes is that, like, tomorrow I'm going to TTI USA, and we are starting this communication of our joint work, and well, that's how we see it. We see it as an opportunity for us, because we don't really like this idea of like Surkov and Makfal overseeing this civil organization. And even to add that Elena Panfilova from Transparency International Russia, she was invited not by Surkov, but by Makfal. And Surkov actually openly said that he doesn't really like the idea that Americans are inviting representative of Russian society, and not only he is choosing who will represent the Russian society. So that's like lots of controversial about it, because he sees it a different way. Probably the only people who him choose to speak, will speak. But well, at least it is a step, some step forward. And if we will be able to, well, we have all the opportunity to cooperate on NGO level. We'll be leading it, but not only TI, but not only Transparency International, but probably cooperating with some other NGOs working in this field. And maybe we'll be, well, our idea is also we can come up with joint reports which can be presented on this commission, and this will be, well, of some use of this commission. We're not that optimistic, but it is, we should use this opportunity for this.
There are a lot of questions, so I'll ask that you keep them short. Kathy Fitzpatrick.
Yes. What I would like to hear more from the panelists is, given that we have these terms that run the risk of being translators' false friends, you know, like transparency and FOIA, they mean very different things in different contexts. What are your benchmarks for judging how authentic these developments are? What are your standards for judging what would be real? In other words, not process like, oh, we have a meeting, or oh, we're going to have a commission, but product. In other words, what would be a test case for transparency? What would be a test case for FOIA? You know, what would be a test case for litigation that you would accept as saying, well, now it's really authentic. It's not just talk.
Well, I will start with transparency issues. Well, there was some benchmarks that they have already, well, at least came closer to this legislation, this precise pieces of legislation that the State Duma passed. Not really like eager to do so, but they have finally done it. And now we'll be checking how those legislation will be implemented. And that's it. If for example the property would be published as it should be published according to law, and for also quite an important thing is conflict of interest when a government official is also involved in a business, or his husband or wife, as it's in the case with Mr. Lushkov, is involved into business. If they file this conflict of interest reports. So that's now our step, what we're going to do, and if this law are being obeyed or not.
Yeah.
Before FOIA was passed, it was not on an empty space. Yeah, our organization had a huge litigation practice, legal practice, to push government to be more open, more transparent. So transparency is such word which we, try to pass through the court system, Russian court system. For example, in 2005-2006, we initiated a case, a trial against 7 Russian federal agencies, and pushed them to create own websites, and post information about their activity. And Russian district court, rule into the favor of us, of society, and rule that this agency has to create their own website and post information about their activity. But in a list of these agencies was, for example, Federal Security Service, Russian Federal Security Service, Federal Bailiff Service, and another agencies. So it was in other cases. I can speak about it. Maybe not now. Good time to give another examples, but it was a huge litigation before Russian government decided, okay, we will pass this law.
I love your approach with the test cases. One of the test cases is Mr. Zaitsev, investigator, who was involved in the investigation on one very high-rank corruption case, Trikita. When he was very serious to investigate that, he suddenly found that he is accused himself. And when the judge was trying to look in the substance of the questions, was tend to acquit him, she was dismissed. I mean, this is already a very well-known fact, and now even the European Court, the first time in the history, said that judge was dismissed unproportionally and with violation of her rights. Never before they touch even these questions. And the second test case is Yuri Shikachikhin, who used to be chief of the State Duma Commission on Anti-Corruption Commission. Only 5 years after his death, in very strange circumstances, this very famous journalist, but plus having this position as leader the anti-corruption committee, and he died in such a strange circumstances. Only in 5 years' term, the Procuratura General started the investigations on this case. And of course they failed. And I call for the American interest to this case, because he was killed, as his family said, and I represent the interest of his family. He was going in 5 days go to the United States to bring the information on the the most important corruption cases, and until now nobody interested in that. Thank you.
In the back.
Craig Gannett with the Jackson Foundation. To the lawyers, are you able to actually enforce the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights in the Russian courts? In other words, if you had a client who was unlawfully jailed, and you went to the European Court, and the European Court agreed with you that your client was unlawfully jailed, are you able to take that judgment back and have it enforced through the Russian system and your client actually released? Or do you obtain more or less a symbolic victory in the European court that doesn't really have a practical effect with respect to your client?
Thank you for your question. Very interesting question, because there are measures of individual character and measures of general character. Concerning measures of individual characters, it is a recognition of the violation, it is a compensation, and sometimes not very symbolic. And the third, if the person was a victim of unfair trial, he has to be retried. And this it costs a lot. If the person was a victim of unlawfully jailed, was this much more difficult? Imagine just recently, and this is new precedent, which is very positive, the Supreme Court of the Russian Federation on Lebedev-Khodorkovsky case decided that if Lebedev was found, and Khodorkovsky recently, I guess, would be the same decision, if the European Court decided that he was on several occasions were jailed unlawfully or without legal grounds, they have to quash these decisions. And it means that he already spent time in jail and it is too late to compensate. But moral compensation, I mean, Lebedev made his statement that for him it's very, very important step. And plus to everything, it means internal compensations, because the European Convention in Article 5 says when any of the rights of this, any paragraph have been violated, it should be a redress. Which redress when the time have already passed? But still, it's important. With the measures of general character, much worse, because it needs to change the law, to change sometimes not really bad law, but really bad administrative practice, or to start the mass investigation, like Chechen cases. More than 100 cases have been decided. Horrible facts of killings, disappearance, torture. Everything has been proven. What have been done by the Russian authorities until the last minute, they never recognized they violated somebody's rights. Of course, they paid compensation. All the compensation. But people, victims, those survivors, those relatives, what they need to receive the kind of truth, effective investigation, if it is possible after 5 years. In some cases, it's still possible, but the Russian authorities mostly deny that they are not effective or they are not doing properly their investigation. That is a problem. That's why Protocol 14 would bring a result, because if the authorities, not of the Russian Federation, Italy or Spain, it doesn't matter, the authorities do not fully implement the judgment, this issue can be reversed back to the court with new decision, with new consequences, legal consequences, and as a consequence, political consequences.
In the back?
Hi, I'm Maria Lokshin with the Center for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law at American University. Hi. I just have a question. What Yvonne on the left mentioned was that a lot of people in Russia by default have social demand for greater human rights. But I'm wondering, is there a way, is there mainstream education for human rights in Russia? Or is it something that is also suppressed? And this is for everybody, I suppose, but just addressing what Yvonne said.
Well, I didn't really clearly get the question because, well, my position was not there is an emerging demand, but there is some core values of human rights became core values of most of the population. So, like, as I said, for young people, freedom of speech on the internet. And what was like?
I'm sorry. So I think what I'm trying to say is that you were saying that people don't necessarily recognize those as human rights, just their own needs for access to the internet, access to information. But as far as understanding what human rights are in general, because I think some of you were saying that there is still a very skeptical approach to human rights among the population. So is there education in the mainstream universities about human rights?
Well, if there are sometimes there is education about human rights, but it is still a lack of, well, like really concept of human rights. It could be taught, but just like there is this declaration of human rights, just learn it, but not really giving the understanding of human rights, and that's we see a lot with Dmitry Makarov, who's sleeping over there in the corner, on the seminars with human rights, youth human rights movement, even organized for young law students. And when we talk with them about human rights, they're just ready only to answer in this, like really basic things about like what is written on the paper, but not the ideas of human rights, what it is about, what it is like really for, as like not the values, not the ideas, but just how it is on the paper.
And I would add a little bit, that government, when they look at the NGO, make an inspection, Ministry of Justice now make inspections of NGOs, and when they discover that NGO makes some sort of educational activity, Ministry of Justice punish such NGO until it will be liquidated at all, because educational activity, according with Russian legislation, NGO has to have a special license, and any actions, seminar, it must be so, how to say, set that,
this is not education.
It's very dangerous for Russian NGO to be involved even in such sort of activity.
Why don't we take these last two hands here as our last two questions? Here and then in the back.
Quick question. How do you see generations playing into this whole interpretation of the human rights movement in Russia? I have been getting a real sense that there's this generational divide. Надо признаться, что замечательно было, что надо было защищать Кенни от Путина. Но возникает интересный вопрос. Какую роль играет поколение над методами правозащитного движения? В России я была там при перестройке, помню, что это было движение молодежи такое. А как, по вашему мнению, сейчас какой роль это играет сейчас? Какая разница между поколениями и методами?
And we'll just get the last question in the back.
Summarize them and then.
Well, we're going to get two questions together, and then we'll finish
Bill
up.
Veal. I'm a retired Foreign Service officer. I was on the Soviet desk in the State Department in the 70s when the human rights issue was coming up. I have a question. I'd like to come at this at a little bit different angle, sort of an indirect angle. Recognize that the panel is referring to social demand. I'd like to know about business demand. There's a dynamic, supposedly a dynamic small and medium-sized business community developing in Russia. And I was wondering if any of you on the panel are seeing business demands for sort of a kind of functional approach, a process approach. For example, the way in which the courts act and perform in adjudicating disputes, commercial disputes that are arising obviously from many more interactions at the business level with all those SMEs out there. Thank you.
We'll let Yvonne handle the generation questions, and we'll turn to the lawyers for the business demand.
Well, I would say that it's not like that the young people are really on the streets changing something, or any kind of like really generation request. Well, generally it is movements which is uniting different people of different age and not really generation request. And I would say that also like young generation, which like more or less my age and younger, they're enjoying the freedoms they have, and they sometimes they do interact with the government, like when police comes and beats them. But generally, those requests which were like really important for this generation in Soviet times, for example, to listen to the music they want to listen. Right now, they can listen to the music they want to listen. Even the bands which play really songs against the government can still organize the concerts and play their songs, and people can listen to them. And well, as I said, like you can watch cartoons and which you want to watch. You have the internet where you can generally see whatever movie which is even could be banned from the cinemas. You can go online and watch it. So that's probably why they're not really like demanding for more, because right now they kind of their demand is met by what it is there.
I would add to this point that in Russia, new human rights generation. I think I will represent new human rights generation. I think that we added a little bit more pragmatic in all movement. We bring, scientific research there. Yeah, we bring skills to act in a courtroom. Yeah, so it's getting more more professional. But professionalism is very good, but that doesn't give a connection with the community. Yeah, and this is same problem like a past generation. Yeah, and future generation has the same problem. Doesn't have a very tough connection with the community. So about how business
demand for
demand to the for human rights.
Human rights.
I think Karina respond better because he knows such businessmen. He defend him.
I've never ever deal with businessmen unless and until businessman Mikhail Khodorkovsky became the most hopeless person in our country. And when we are saying about the lack of legal representation, it's a big problem, systemical problem, I would say. But this man has proper representation, believe me, and then people stay in trial. They really effectively oppose to all the prosecution strange and sometimes absurd ideas and points. But still, there is no a way for him to be released in current conditions. What business community now feel very well, and it is after this test case. It happens after this test case. Everybody had realized that they are not free to act. So it is kind of strange, as I started to explain previously, strange form of free market where everybody is free until and unless the authorities want them to act in the direction in which they are not prepared to do that. And so now they are more or less prepared, because that is very, very simple choice. You follow or you go out of the business in the best way, or you go to prison. That's all. That is very poor choice, I would say. And with this poor choice, of course, the business community is led by the authorities. And in the situation where we have no division of power, separation of powers, legislative power, executive power, judicial power, as I demonstrated in several occasions, the business we also have no fourth power as the free journalist community on many occasions. Even the existence, I would reply, even the existence of Echo Moskvy and Novaya Gazeta demonstrate, as all the exclusions demonstrate the rule. The rule is that everybody is under the executive already, and quite long ago. And business community could play a remarkable role, like in all normal civil society. But the problem is that everybody is mobilized in a society where the authoritarianism or something like this exists, and business is one of the victims of this regime, because business is really and visibly oppressed by the authorities. So they repeal, of course, the human rights issues, but when they are in troubles.
If I may add, we in Transparency International, we sometimes work with, generally it's regional organizations of entrepreneurs association when they have big problems with some corruption cases. Well, not with, let's say, not with all of them, but when this corruption is really getting out of hand, they do really sometimes come organized to us for help and ask for help. There is some kind of like this level of corruption which is tolerated, but sometimes the regional government can do something like really out of hand, or something really like more than the tolerated level of corruption, much more. And then in this case, sometimes they do unite, and they do even do some kind of civil campaigns, you would even say, and even they organize their actions, for example, on the streets to protect their protect their business, which is quite surprising.
Okay.
If I am allowed to put the question to the panelists, you say that in some moment the government starts to understand that this level of corruption should be prevented.
Yeah? No, it wasn't my point. I was saying that the businessmen, for them there is a tolerated level of corruption, and then there is sometimes. Okay,
but anyway, I recorded like this. But if it is wrong, I just put the question. From what part of the society you feel, your researchers show you, the corruption comes from which part of the society? Who is corrupt? I'm sorry. Who is struggling corruption?
I think we have another conference coming, but
no.
Just we need a lawyer.
There are plenty of lawyers in the room as well. So
it depends on what you'll be saying. According to surveys, every third person have given a bribe during the last year, and it is like the lowest estimation. You can say that it's probably more. If you would be talking about numbers, the biggest corruption is in tenders and government. Government spendings and procurement and all this part, and also there is a big issue with petty corruption, which is spread among people and which actually influence a lot on attitudes, and that's quite a big work which we are doing, trying to work with these petty corruption issues, because even though people are paying really small bribe for these small things, but they're getting into this and starting to accept corruption as something normal. So that's why we work a lot also on this really ground level, trying to help people like not to give a bribe when they're getting their passport.
Yeah, that's great activity. activity. Do you think that the government, the authorities, are serious in their elimination of the corruption?
Well, I would say that on the petty level, yes, quite serious, because, well, those money doesn't go to them. So well, even this e-governance system, if we'll have it, and I'm pretty sure that Medvedev is putting it quite on top of his priorities. He wants it to be there. He wants people to actually see the results of his rule. And if we will have this, well, according to these plans, by the time he will leave by the time his first term ends, let's put it this way, we'll be able to get almost everything through the internet. So this will eliminate the most of the field for petty corruption, because you don't need to actually to see the government official to obtain to pass your documents for the passport, to obtain your data, to obtain a permission to do some kind of like work in your house or whatever. Like the whole, almost everything will be done through the internet, and that would really help with this petty corruption things.
Well, I see Karina's still ready to keep going, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to bring the proceedings to an end. I would like to thank our panelists. I would like to thank all of you for, most of you have managed to stay the whole day here, which really testifies to the resonance of this issue, and I think there's a lot to discuss going forward. And finally, I'd like to thank the Jackson Foundation and our staff for all their hard work in making this such a success. Thanks very much.